Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ed Gow Jr. I'm a member of Dad Central Ontario, and I'm joined here by Drew Solon, who is the director for Dad Central Ontario. And we are very happy that you are part of this great event. And we are doing monthly live online chats in partnership with Dove Men Care. And we have another great panel today, great speakers, great shares. And we're going to be chatting today about how dads can raise resilient kids. So I'm just going to introduce our great panel of guests today. First up, we have Dr. Andrew Howlett. He's a psychiatrist, St. Joseph's Health Network, and founder of the Father's Mental Health Network. We have John, and I want to make sure I get his name right, Suey. and John is the founder of Win Each Day. And finally, we have from the left coast, Dr. John Olive, professor, School of Nursing, University of British Columbia, founder and lead of the UBC Men's Health Research Program. Gentlemen, how are we doing this afternoon?
We're doing great. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Good.
And let me correct it, morning for John, afternoon for our other panelists. Want to make sure I get that right. So just a little housekeeping rules before we get started. We have a lot of people watching this live. And first of all, we want to thank you for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule during especially this time to be part of this great conversation. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat room and we are going to answer them or get our panelists to answer them to their best of their ability with the time that we have. I have a feeling we're going to get a number of questions, and anything that we can ask, we'll certainly take offline and get back to you. So before we go any further, I'd like to introduce Drew. Drew, how are we doing this afternoon?
We're doing great. Looking forward to the conversation. So thank you, Ed, John, Andrew, and Justin. I'm really honored that you've given your time and experience to us and to everyone who's going to be on the call today. I just have a couple. My name again is Drew Solon. I'm the director of Dad Central Ontario. So thank you everyone for joining us live. And of course, a welcome to anyone who will be watching the replay. We're really excited to bring this conversation to you today for many reasons. But I think most importantly, because of what Ed was referencing, what we're all experiencing right now through the uncertain and turbulent circumstances around us. And so our goal today is really to support dads, their families, and the people who support them. We know everyone is being tested, and really we want to help. And that's why I'm equally excited about the panel that you will be hearing from today, and know you're going to get a lot of value. So thank you, Ed, for your support of Dad Central and for moderating today's conversation. I'll turn it back over to you to get us started.
Okay, thank you so much, Drew, and thank you for allowing me to be part of these conversations, and great working with you as always. So what we're going to do here, folks, I'd like to set a little bit of agenda. We're going to get each one of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, share a little about their current roles and why this topic matters to them. Then we're going to have a roundtable. I'm going to ask some questions. The panelists are going to provide some answers. And then probably in the last 10 or 15 minutes of the conversation, we'll get your questions answered by our panelists. So I'm going to start with John first to give a little bit about his background, his current role, and why this topic matters to him. So John, please share with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for the opportunity to have a chat. Yeah, my background is a clinical background. I was a registered nurse, a clinical nurse specialist working in emergency department for 20 years, and then kind of got into teaching, and then started research and did a PhD looking at prostate cancer and guys' experiences of that, and then continued to do work in men's health. And so we do a lot of work in depression and suicidality, smoking cessation amongst dads. We do things around prostate cancer, psychosocial, all things men's health, not in a divisive way, but in a really inclusive way, and just trying to work with things that look amenable to interventions that can help everybody have better lives, including the guys. So we work out of UBC. I'm a professor there. Yeah, and really looking forward to today's conversation in the context of thinking about some of the mental health challenges and how they're relational and relatable to dads. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Justin.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks, Ed and Drew, for having me on. My background is as a high school teacher and coach. I was a high school teacher for 15 years in phys ed, student success, little geography. I also coached many different sports, football predominantly, track, hockey, rugby. So I've done a little bit of everything. I recently made the full-time switch away from teaching to focus more on growing the Win Each Day movement, which is a health and wellness focus business with my wife. Predominantly work on, again, wellness, supporting people with wellness, with mindset, a little really bit about everything, more about empowering people to create different actions in their life so that they can connect to their greatness. So why does this mean a lot to me right now? Because I've realized in my own life that as I have shifted my focus into showing up as a better husband and a dad, that it's created more great things in my life. So I just want to be able to share some of the tools and some of the strategies with, a lot of my former students and athletes.
Wonderful. And Andrew.
Hi, everyone, and happy Mental Health Week as well. I'm an East Coaster, but living in Toronto, where I'm working in a couple different hospitals. I'm a father of 3. I'm a psychiatrist, and I work with children and adolescents and their families, as well as developed a father's mental health program that provides mental health care and support to men who may be expectant fathers or new fathers, and to their families, and offer that at a couple sites here in Toronto. It was during my training in child psychiatry that I began to see a lot of kids presenting with their moms, and I started to wonder, where were the dads in these situations? And that sort of brought a new meaning to Where's Waldo? And that kind of led me on this journey of first thinking of ways to include men and dads in their child's care, to engaging them to the point of providing care and looking after them, with the hope that healthy fathers, will equal healthy families. And I think today's topic is an excellent one for all of us who are parents, and try to think of, and want to distill, what is that one thing that we hope for our kids? Well, resiliency is a good place to land on that. So delighted to be here and to be a part of today's event.
Excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing a little bit about yourselves and your why for being here, and your why for doing the great stuff that you're doing. So let's start off with some of our questions for today's event. And here's my first question. Let's talk about the common language for the main topic, resiliency. When we hear the word resilience a lot, and probably now more than ever, but from your perspective, each of your perspectives, what are we really talking about when we say resilience? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I could start. For me, resiliency is kind of doing what it takes to tip the scale, for the individual, and I think in this context for the family, towards health and positive outcomes. Especially in the context of any form of adversity, or if one is, carries the weight of a lot of, past negative experiences or situations. That resiliency is our ability to do something about the situation that allows us to achieve positive outcomes and achieve better health for ourselves, and I think for the whole family, in talking about raising kids and about being dads and parents.
Yeah, they're really great points, Andrew. I just to build on a couple, just to say, in the context of dads and in context of our work with men, resilience and resiliency is often about strategies, and it's often about the doing. And so, when we talk to guys, they tend to want to have some things that they can effectively self-manage some of the challenges around, being anxious about things, being a little bit flat and depressed about things, and that resiliency to butter up, so to speak, for other people in their lives, but also to be the best that they can be. So, when I think about resiliency, I often think about a playbook for guys where they might have some strategies to slow some problems down address them piece by piece, and even when they're under time pressure, to try and look like they're not under time pressure, to slow things down, to be able to, you know, engage in the issues, to try and not necessarily even solve the problems, but just process the problem sometimes to work their way through.
Thanks. Good stuff. Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, to me, resiliency is about being showing up first and foremost, right, for the important people and things in your life. But I would even look at it as it's intentionally responding, right? Especially with challenges, it's easy to get into that sort of autopilot reactionary mode. But I think when you sort of do your best to separate the emotion from the action, then we come back with more intention and a more conscious action, which John highlighted, and it just allows us to show up a little bit better. And when we do get on autopilot, which we're all going to be, because we're not perfect, we're not robots, it's compassionately sort of using it as a learning opportunity to try to better ourselves next time we're put in that spot.
Excellent. I just want to stay on this for just a second. And Andrew, you had mentioned something, and the other panelists, you're more than welcome to join in. Andrew, you mentioned something about past experiences. Can you like flush that out just a little bit? Because I thought it was a very interesting point about resiliency and past experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, what I've become aware of clinically is, you know, is parents and dads really motivated on ensuring that that their kids, you know, may not have similar difficult or adverse experiences, you know, as they may have gone through. I think generally we all want, you know, a better sort of path in life for our kids. What I've come to realize is that, you know, dads, and especially seeing them clinically, you know, have their own, you know, adversity, whether from the, you know, past childhood experiences or otherwise. And which they have had to form their own resiliency through. And for some that's, you know, been easier than others, but I think, you know, being aware of our own resiliency as dads and what we're doing towards that and what may be getting in the way of that can be really helpful in, you know, more kind of, you know, active and mindful parenting, you know, as Justin alluded to as well, of, you know, intention of how we, you know, respond to various situations. So yeah, I think adversity can be right in front of us, but how what we've learned and experienced in the past can also have an impact on parenting.
Excellent. Justin or John, anything you want to add to that? Okay, they're good. Thank you, people, for making, people out there who are making comments. Lots of comments flying in the chat room, which is great. I'm just going to pick one or two in lieu of time. Rose is saying here, or Helen, sorry, is saying resiliency for me means that when faced with a problem, not giving up and finding ourselves being able to learn and develop character in both parents and children. Nice answer. Nice, nice. Ross is saying how to problem solve or at least try and not get discouraged if at first it doesn't work, but to try it again. Caroline saying, for me, it means bouncing back from difficult situations. Excellent. Excellent. Keep the comments flowing. This is really, really good. Very interactive. Let's go to our next conversation piece. From each of your perspectives, why does building resilience matter for our kids?
For me, can I speak? I didn't get to introduce myself. I'm sorry, my video uploaded a little bit late. My role is supporting dads and working with dads. I'm a family support worker. So I try really hard to bring that perspective, and because historically not having a dad, I know how important it is to have one in your life. And for me, what I've found quite helpful for some dads, because again, like you said, we have lots of previous experiences and conditioning from our society as to how they think they're supposed to be. And part of the piece that's helped communicate resiliency for me is learning to be compassionate. So yeah, life is going to happen. You're going to get hit with things all the time. But the ability to walk through that is your resiliency, your ability to take in what's coming and demonstrate to your children that, you know what, life is hard. if we stick together, just like we're saying in this crisis, if we stick together and talk about it and process our feelings and work through it, that builds our resilience and helps us work past and through that together, and also strengthens the bond between the parent and the child, because they're seeing that, wow, we can work through this together. Does that make sense?
Sure. No problem. Thank you, Tara. Just just inform you, Tara, and everyone else, we're going to basically just taking comments in the chat section because of the number of people on. We're not allowing too much live, so maybe you chimed in late, no problem, but we appreciate the perspective. If you could put yourself on mute, that would be fantastic. So getting back to our panelists, I'll just repeat the question again. We have, from your perspective, why does building resilience matter for our kids? Who wants to take that first?
Just to say, just building on Tara's point, you know, this stuff is relational, and and very much so. Kids see how you handle things, you know. So I think for dads, you know, some of the challenges are that sometimes we can be perhaps some of the things that are accepted in terms of expression can be around irritability and anger, for example, and so we don't want to necessarily show that kind of approach. What we want to do is model the things that we want to see, and because we do message those around us and we get reactions back from them. So it's thinking about how you can role model as well as be effective in your own resiliency, because it catches on. If people who are in and around you are definitely going to be impacted. So that the relational aspect of resiliency, I think, is key. And I often, you know, cite the example of, you know, when you watch the football, it's like they might throw the ball for a while, they might run the ball for a while. Their strategies, they change depending on what's going on around them. And I think it's a good analogy for having more than one or two ways of solving problems and working through the challenges that, you know, as people point out, inevitably come up.
Well, and John brings up the good point. I think a big thing that really needs to be done is to, you know, we live in a world of duality where we label things as good or bad. And sometimes it's just about, well, most of the time, it's just about observing those emotions and feelings that come up. I really recognize that the more I did this work in my own life, I remember my last year of teaching, I brought up the word emotions and feelings with my grade 10 male phys ed class. And there was this uncomfortable giggle that just went across the room. And it's one of those things where we're almost taught from a young age, and people, I think, teaching with the best of intentions, to suppress uncomfortable or quote unquote bad emotions and feelings, and then really driving towards the good ones. But, you know, again, resilience is about just observing what's coming up. And then, like you said, with that information, you know, starting to ask, why are these coming up, right? What is the action? How? So I think it's about normalizing conversation around emotions and feelings and understanding they're part of the human experience, but then not allowing them to drive our actions all the time.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, important to build resiliency, because in some ways I think that's a lot easier than trying to raise a kid in a perfect sort of stress-free world that we all know, you know, doesn't exist. And so I think, you know, building resiliency, you know, it matters because there are, you know, it has positive associations with good health outcomes, good relationships, quality of life. You know, and I think it's, you know, as parents, you know, and, you know, resiliency to even everyday stresses can be, you know, can be tested. And I think that's, you know, as others were saying, it's kind of where that begins in terms of, you know, wanting our kids to be resilient and, you know, really reflecting on ourselves and what are we doing and how are we, you know, how are we modeling that. Because, you know, one thing resiliency isn't is, you know, being able to manage everything on one's own. You know, it's not about being self-reliant. It's about, you know, it's about, you know, kind of, you know, working with, you know, with others and having positive relationships as one aspect to it.
Fantastic. Just want to add in again, thanks everyone making great comments. You're making Drew and I work today. The panelists got it easy. Drew and I got to work it today. Just David is saying, lead by example. I forget the context attribution, but I saw a quote yesterday. It was that was along the lines of kids won't remember what you tried to teach them. They'll remember what you were. Neil is also saying if dads can show their kids that it's okay to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes, this helps kids to be able to build their own, quote, bounce back, unquote, resiliency skills. Yakub was saying, thanks for this. I think our children take us as their role models, and as such, fathers should be supported to live as strong as possible. And Darren is saying, sometimes the dads we work with just need a cheerleader. They need someone to tell them, that they have their strengths and that they're capable. And Caroline's saying, children remember how you made them feel. We are role models and they learn from watching us. Folks, excellent comments. Just keep them flowing. Make myself and Drew work today and let the panelists just lay back and watch us sweat. Next conversation piece we have going here. What are the signs of resilience? If you were observing or working with dads or children on this topic, what might be the ability to be resilient look like?
I think, well, for me, I look at my own kids in little everyday situations. So when we were on vacation a couple months ago, my kids were playing and my daughter had one of her teeth knocked out, one of her baby teeth. So that was great because they were just playing around. And without even saying anything, without being prompted, the first thing she said to me was, well, at least it didn't go further down the back of my throat. It was like a toothbrush. So I think it's just one of the ways I always look at is, can we find the positive or something that we're grateful for, right? Or something that we're appreciative of. So right there, without any prompting, she was able to sort of train herself to something she was grateful for, right? And that is something that I always look for, because I know if that just shows they're operating at a great energy state. So that shows me the ability to find an opportunity there to be grateful.
Yeah, I think, working with dads, especially in a clinical context, I think about it in two ways. I think about, what are the signs of the process of resiliency happening, where they are, developing or maintaining the resiliency. And then what are the kind of outcomes or signs that, that they, are kind of responding in a resilient way. So, when dads are asking for help, curious to learn more about their mental health or about parenting, and kind of exploring that way, when they are able to share with me or in a group, kind of reflect and share part of their story, I see that as a good sign. When they can identify the different stressors and maybe some options of how to handle that stress, even when they don't necessarily choose the best option, I see that as a sign of a process of a resilient dad. I think how they reflect and talk about and build on their coping strategies. And the other thing would be, their sense of, of connection, with others and having meaningful relationships. And so dads that are sort of striving or doing that, I see that as a positive sign of building resiliency. And then I think the outcomes of that are when they can bring that awareness of, I'm a resilient dad, or doing, or becoming one, is great. I think, despite some of the real mental health challenges that may still be ongoing, when they see positive change in their lifestyle, in their physical health, in their relationship with their kids, or talk about how great their kids are doing despite, the parental mental health struggles, I see those as wonderful signs and outcomes of a resilient parent.
Great. John.
Yeah, great points and terrific comments coming in too.
Yeah, it's just a crazy good.
I know that they got you guys working for sure.
I tell you.
Just to say, just some terrific points, and agree with everything that's been said. I think resiliency looks like a work in progress. Like, so it's a long game, and I think, our strategies change over time and in different decades of our lives, and and relationally into where the kids are, right, in terms of their age and development. So I think that's one of the things. I really like Andrew's point about, you know, it's not self-reliance. And you know, just to open it up a little bit to say, you know, vulnerabilities are okay, and they're really hard to admit and to talk to and to model. I think especially for parents and dads in particular, perhaps, you know, just to sort of, that you don't have all the answers, that you might not have done something perfectly and that you're working through it. I think those vulnerabilities are really important. So I'd say, you know, resiliency looks like a work in progress. It looks like it looks like an acknowledgement of the vulnerabilities that we've all got, and to work through those. So just to say, just to you know, absolutely affirm the things that have been said. You know,
Wonderful. And if the panelists want to address any of the comments that are made on the side and maybe take some weight off of myself and Drew, you're more than happy to do that. So no, you guys are going to let us sweat. That's all right. That's okay. That's why you guys are the guests and we're the hosts. So just want to catch up on the comments here. Louise saying resiliency, building up your toolkit so that when things happen, you have your self-care, problem solving, and support network to go-tos to help you through. Ross is saying a dad that is open to help or input from their supports. That can take in information and not just dismiss it. Thomas saying looking for the silver lining in things like that. Emery saying when you think, quote, I can do this, unquote. Robin again, I think resiliency is about the ability to regulate emotions. If dads show their children they're able to regulate things like anger, anxiety, etc., their children will learn those coping skills from them and learn to regulate their emotions as well, consequently building their resiliency. Ross, again, when they choose to take a different path than they may have in the past. I'm going to stop right there because we got to get through all these questions too, but I will do my best to get through all the comments. If not, it's my head, not my heart. So let's have our next conversation piece. Gentlemen, what are the barriers or challenges that might prevent a person from developing resilience?
I'll throw something in. Just, you know, sometimes we get caught in our own habits, you know, and we can't see the forest for the trees, so to speak. When the problem's in front of us, it's just the problem is all we can see. And I think, you know, again, I think that can just, you know, you rarely get anything done positively when you're just completely stressed out. And I think it freezes action. So I think I don't think it precludes the development of resiliency over time, but I think in cross-sectional moments, in those little things each day that pop up, potentially it can just lend us to not being as good as we might have hoped.
Okay.
Can I also add something? Sorry. Hi, this is Helen.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, I'm from Toronto. I work at one of the early on centers, trying to support fathers being more engaged with their children. So I think part of not being able to have resiliency would be isolation. I think that's a number one thing. Sometimes even when you're in a family full of people, you can still feel isolated if you don't feel comfortable to ask for help. So I feel like that's really important to help fathers understand that it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. And once you're able to get rid of, like, you know, I have to solve problems all by myself, then it opens the doors to resiliency. Because once you're able to show your family that you're vulnerable, then there's a level of trust, right? So if you're not able to trust anyone, then you being able to be resilient is, you know, kind of weakened, right? So.
All right. Thank you, Helen. Just again, an FYI that if anyone has any comments, please make them through the chat room because we have a large number of people that I'm sure would want to come on. We have a limited amount of time, but Helen, thank you for your commentary. So I think I think I have to repeat that question again, or I think John answered it, and I think maybe we're looking for some response from Andrew and or Justin. So either one of those gentlemen, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think, barriers to developing resiliency, some of it are certainly beyond, the individual's control. Things, and I think like Helen was mentioning, certainly isolation and lack of supports or resources as ways to kind of navigate through difficulties. Other factors to consider, is a degree of kind of a mental illness, and may certainly interfere with that. I think as we sort of imagine life as again, kind of on one end, negative or adverse experiences, and on the other end, positive experiences and positive outcomes. The heavier that weighs sort of in the negative realm is, obviously makes it more challenging to break through and develop that resiliency. For those who don't have good role models of developing resiliency, and those who have a history of trauma can struggle more in developing that. And and a real fear of failure, or as John was mentioning earlier, kind of that vulnerability, can be a interfere with and cause a resistance to change, in the ways that people might need to.
Thank you, Justin.
I think just if we can't chronically hold on to those stressors every day, right? Like right now, we are living in a interesting and challenging time. And if we don't have those tools, or we don't have those practices that allow us to release some of those feelings of stress, that they just build up over time, and our ability to cope shrinks. So I think that's where the importance of having those health and wellness practices, whether it's movement every day, whether it's journaling, whether it's gratitude, I think that's where it's so powerful, is because they allow us to release a bit of that, right? And having those daily. So so I guess going back to your question, sort of maybe a lack of not a lack of practice, but maybe consistent practice of those stress releasing tools.
Okay. Fantastic. It's called as usual catch-up comment time. So just doing some quick catch-ups on some comments here. Lazio says, teach your kid that there's obstacles in this world that you can't avoid, and to make the most of everything. Darren says, I also think that the dads we work with have resiliency. They are often survived through trauma to get to this point. The key for me is in family strengthening, is redistributing the resiliency into more positive strategies. Nadia has a long comment here, but I'm going to get back to that later, because I think there's also a question. She also has a question involved with it, so we'll get to that later. Also, Helen saying sharing thoughts and knowing that children want to see their fathers being honest and also being emotionally supported by their partners. And I'll just end off this segment with Matthew saying, to raising resilient children to me is allowing myself to demonstrate my shortcomings and my mistakes to my child. And when they run into problems, ask them, quote, what else might work? All right. So our next conversation, how can a dad support their children in overcoming some of these barriers or challenges?
Yeah, I think as we've been talking, the theme of being a role model, in resiliency. And there's two things that sort of come to mind, with resilient men, is that in part, I think sometimes their resiliency is fairly silent, that men aren't explicit about, or dads, aren't explicit about their kind of understanding of the situation, the options that they see, and kind of dealing with the problem, and the sort of thinking through part. That might benefit a kid to hear about, the way that their dad is sort of thinking and feeling about any situation. And so in some cases, the resiliency can be kind of silent or just missed in terms of a child being able to be aware of how their dad is handling, a particular situation. At the same time, we might see dads sort of coping with stress, you know, in a more external way that's more common with men than women, you know, in lifestyle choices, whether it's smoking or drinking alcohol or, you know, or smoking marijuana or other things that, that may stand out as a way that their dad might be managing stress. But as I said, a kid might kind of miss the opportunity to you know, appreciate the other ways that a dad you know, is kind of exploring and working through their own problems or problems within the family that are relevant to the kid. So I think you know, being kind of more explicit in what we're doing and being a bit more mindful of how we're handling stress as dads can be, you know, some ways to build resiliency in kids. I've got a few other thoughts, and maybe I'll come back and let the others speak.
Okay. John or Justin?
Yeah, for me, I try to involve my kids in some of those, like Andrew was mentioning, those resilient tools. So, you know, I try to invite them to join me for my daily movement, or we do some breathing together before bedtime, or we just talk and hang out. So I just try to involve them because I find for myself, it gets me out of my head when I'm feeling it, and being able to, and I think a common theme here is modeling and leading by example, but then also showing my kids how these tools really are just, you can integrate them into your life pretty easily. So I just try to focus on involving my kids there because it really benefits me, and to just show them these are how these are why these tools are useful.
Yeah, terrific points. And just going back to Helen's comment too, you know, I think it prevails for kids, right? Like, ask for help. Like, that's one of the things that if you model, you know, that it's not a solitary enterprise to just, you know, solve your own problems, that we all need some assistance. And, you know, the idea is if we can develop some strategies, then we can share them with other folks, and, you know, then there's a kind of a reciprocity. So it's mutual help. It's not support in a traditional sense. So I think that can be very persuasive for kids. The idea that the permission that it's okay to ask for help, I think, is really important. So I really pick up on Helen's point there. The other bit that Justin's mentioned and Andrew alluded to as well, you know, is, yeah, exercise as something that can be shared or something that can be seen to benefit, and kids have often got a fair bit of energy to burn, right? So again, it's, you know, it's not going to necessarily solve problems, but at the same time, there might be that physiological benefit of getting out, moving around, taking your mind off things to come back clearer to them. I think they're things that kids buy into, and sometimes as adults we kind of forget. We kind of get too strapped. I think one of the things is time pressure as adults, and I think we start to miss things that are kind of fairly simple options that maybe, you know, are easy to transmit and a norm in the family.
Okay. Andrew, you said you may have some additional comments on this one, so if you want to share them now, please feel free.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think you know, one big thing is, you know, in you know, in being with your child and recognizing that, you know, they'll encounter problems that seem very big to them and very small to us, and they'll have big feelings in situations that you know, kind of surprise us. But I think, you know, making that effort to understand their perspective and to try to acknowledge their big feelings, you know, in these situations, and that whatever it is, you know, is important to them. It doesn't mean we're going to give them what they want, but I think feeling heard and listened to and understood as a kid is, you know, is really helpful in, you know, in building their emotional intelligence, and also, you know, making it feel safe to continue to talk about, you know, what's bothering them and how they're feeling about things, so that they don't develop the you know, the shame or fear or pride that prevents that moving forward. A couple of things. I think that reading to your kids is an incredibly, you know, valuable activity, and you know, I think it has so much value, I think, in terms of dedicating time to your kids, you know, building empathy by reading stories, you know, giving up quieter and opportunities to just, you know, be, you know, present and kind of, you know, connected to your kid. You know, and opportunities for these other things to sort of develop. And so, you know, I'm thinking about that. I made sure I, you know, read to my kids this morning for a few minutes. I mean, I usually don't read to them in the morning, but I thought I better do that today, just to, if I'm going to talk about it. But, and I say to others, you know, I Google, like, you know, how to read stories to kids. Like Robert Munch does a great job. So I don't always use the video, but I try to, you know, play out, you know, and sort of, you know, be a more active reader, you know, with my kids. But I really can't emphasize enough that activity, I think, you know, has many opportunities with it. Yeah. So.
Okay. Thank you so much for the addition there. Just catching up back to the chat room, Caroline is saying self-efficacy, believing in our competence. I believe we have to validate kids, their feelings, and letting them know that they are doing a good job to build their self-efficacy. Ross is saying, I deal with lots of dads dealing with the ministry, and the first thing is changing the mind from wanting to fight to be willing to work with them. Nam is saying to raise resilient children, we need to teach resiliency to fathers. Absolutely. Rick is saying lack of education or the know-how to change. Reg is saying lack of successful peer models seems to be a factor in our work. Success breeds success, and clients appear to be very motivated by others in our groups overcoming obstacles. Good, vulnerable community seems essential. Tara saying often it is the family and our social groups that keeps us stuck as we change old patterns. I feel it's helpful and often necessary to seek out those who align with what you want for you and your children. Okay, we'll catch up with more comments in just a bit. Next question for our panel. What limitations might a person experience if they aren't able to build or demonstrate resilience? And I'm going to actually ask John here, because John shared a story with myself and Drew about a dad who wished he modeled more vulnerability. Might be the perfect fit. That story that you shared, if you can bring it up, John, right now, it'd be great to share with our audience.
Yeah, sure. So we, you know, as I mentioned at the front end, we do some work with male depression and suicidality, and one of the studies we did was, you know, interviewing folks and asking them to take photographs of their experience of losing a male to suicide. And this was a dad in his, he would have been in his early 50s, and he lost his son, 16-year-old, to suicide. And his thesis, his narrative was that he wished that he had modeled more vulnerability to his boy, because he felt that the pressure his son was under was one of the contributing factors to him ending his life. And it was interesting because the narratives around his son were very much that he was very successful in terms of sporting prowess, popularity at school, all those markers that we tend to think of as kind of, you know, gendered ideals for men. And he was fulfilling all those for all intent and purposes, but it was underlined with a depression, and yeah, it was a very sad ending. But I think the dad saying around vulnerability was such a striking conversation to have with him, because it just reminds us all that it's just so important that we don't put that kind of pressure on ourselves, but also that the transferability of that pressure to kids, you know, and in this case a boy, you know, is very big, very profound. It can be very profound. So I think just, you know, that was just, has always stayed with me. It was just one of those ones that's a great reminder that as dads, you know, the idea would be that you would acknowledge those things that are going on for you as well.
Okay. Andrew or Justin want to add to that at all?
No, I mean, I think that's a really, you know, powerful story, and thanks for sharing, you know, and yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the you know, relationships and resiliency, you know, kind of build, you know, purpose and meaning and you know, and opportunities for, you know, greater health despite whatever, you know, comes our way. And so, you know, working towards that, you know, I think sets our kids up for the best possible future, you know, as much as we can, you know, because their health and lives, you know, depend on that. And yeah.
Okay. Justin? You're good? All right. So let me catch up on comments. Tara is saying, often it is family and our social groups that keep us stuck as we seek to change our old patterns. I feel it is helpful and often necessary to seek out those who are aligned with what you want for you and your children. Louise says, we work with incarcerated fathers. Shame, guilt, past trauma, lack of positive role models hold them back from building resiliency as a dad. Maxine saying, not having the information how traumas or adverse experiences may have affected their resiliency. Tara again saying, also like others are saying, empower and validate dads for what they do bring to the table. Ross is saying, support worker being non-judgmental. Dana, I am a family's first home visitor and helping families learn from resilience. We do towards flourishing. One of our coping strategies is 3 good things. Having parents think of 3 good things they have done as a parent each night and encouraging them to write them down. I'm a big believer in that philosophy. In our household, we do every Sunday 3 wins. So we get everyone at the dinner table and tell 3 good wins or 3 wins. Doesn't matter how big or how small, and it sets them up for success going into the upcoming week. So that is fantastic. Neil, Tara. Okay, I'm going to ask another question here of our panel. From each of your perspectives, what is the most important factor dads should understand to help their children develop resilience? Not a loaded question.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we've been talking about. It's we as dads need to model it and lead by example. I know as a dad that sometimes when I see a behavior or an action or a comment that I don't like, I sometimes think about just correcting my kids, right? Where I know that they've learned it from somewhere. So it's about coaching them to, again, have a more intentional response to whatever's happened, right? So again, and that's where it starts and ends with me and taking that responsibility. And when I make those mistakes, I am the first to own it with my kids and say, Dad's not perfect. Okay, Dad makes mistakes and doing it. So again, sort of the modeling and leading by example.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think dads have a unique and you know, profound opportunity, you know, in raising a resilient kid. And from my experience in working with dads, having kids has been a catalyst for their own resiliency, you know, and a wish to be more resilient, but also a process that you know, activates their stress and moves toward becoming more resilient. But I think as men, and, you know, and dads, and really as parents, you know, we want to be the person or a co-parent in the family that can heal, that can provide, that can protect, that can support, you know, development and independence. You know, that the way of doing that for our kids is, you know, by working at our own resiliency and being mindful of you know, trying to raise that resilient kid. Yeah, I think anything that we can do, you know, on one hand to, you know, reduce the chance of them experiencing adversity is one thing, but how we get up when we fall is you know, really important.
Okay, excellent. John, want to add?
Really great points. Just to say, I think there's a reciprocity. I think that we can learn things from the kids as well. You know, so you know, to take a little bit of that pressure off and of always, you know, being the role model, which definitely is there, but to also acknowledge that when things are handled by kids, your affirmation for what went well and your ability to learn from it too, I think is great validation that that kids are going in a certain direction, and you know, and a kind of considered calling on things that could have gone better, you know, is the other way of continuing to just create that conversation, because I think the conversation is important.
Right. Excellent. Back to the chat room. Tara is saying, making sure to connect with your kids regularly. If you work a lot or away, make a special tie to be with your child and just you. Practice just being, not always feeling the need to be doing. This brings security to your children too. Like Justin said, they enjoy just being with you. You have lots to share with them that they don't get anywhere else. Nam saying, I work with Punjabi fathers and I feel cultural resiliency gets lots because they have never been taught what it is. Thank you for your acknowledgement. Red saying, teaching kids that having a supportive group of friends is important, and also sharing age appropriately regarding my own struggles and successes seem to help my kids. Nick says, I think it's so important that there's a message conveyed to children that family relationships are also resilient. That transitions in families can be managed, and that love and support can sustain when the family unit changes. Zeniab, I hope I got your name right. Give the child the tools they need, such as confidence and connected to people around them, so they will have the ability to manage their emotions correctly. Let's see, we got, Robin just sharing this with John. Very powerful story, really important to be open about emotions and feelings with your children, labeling those feelings and co-regulating to learn how to cope with intense emotion. Rose, fathers do model healthy relationships with exes, treat people with respect, and you can get through it without putting the other person down. All right, let's get back to some questions. And I think John's liking what he's hearing. I just saw a nice grin on his face. So last question for our panel that we had to ask them. What resources do you recommend as a next step for anyone interested in this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, you know, parenting and resiliency, I've been surprised and amazed at what I've been able to find through a variety of ways. I think public health agencies, you know, are offering supports and services, and everywhere I go, you know, recognizing, you know, the importance of a co-parent and father involvement. Early child youth centers and child year centers are a great resource in doing some really innovative things, and I've learned from them around engaging dads. There's some great, you know, kind of websites. One, joiningforcesforchildren.org is one that I found, you know, helpful, and particularly understanding adverse experiences and resiliency and how to work with people at different stages and levels around doing what we're talking about today.
Okay. Other gentlemen.
This exactly what you're doing, like, because this is connecting and it's affirming experience and it's looking for strategy. So I, you know, never underestimate the power of this medium in and of itself, because even if we're able to do it with one or two other people and chime in around shared experience, I think that does make a difference to us. So really good things there, and looking for those opportunities and those permissions to connect in the way that we need to, which is like what we're doing today. Not to pathologize, you know, mental illness, but to say that, you know, there is a website, it's called Heads Up Guys. It's offered to help with fellas who might be experiencing depressive symptoms, you know, and it's very tailored, but it's also got a lovely section for partners, which I think is incredibly important. So again, you know, we know that for a lot of guys, the e-health space is palatable because it's anonymous. There's no waiting rooms. It's 24/7, and you can just do a little bit of self-assessment, and that's some of the traffic that we're getting to that particular website. So, you know, not in a parochial sense, but there's been a lot of traffic to that one, Heads Up Guys, and so just thinking about other resources that might bridge to professional help, such as what Andrew provides, but but also, you know, the day-to-day stuff that that helps us work through, you know, some of the challenges.
I would just encourage people, a big thing now, especially with this physical distancing going on, is just finding community. If we've ever needed a reminder of how important it is to not feel alone, the last 7 weeks, I think, have reminded us of all that. And community can look lots of different ways. I mean, it can be one loved one, a friend that you can have these kind of conversations about, and just, you know, if you're struggling, you know, someone you trust. I heard it come up a lot. Or two, you know, technology sometimes gets a bad rap, but hey, technology is a beautiful gift as well. It's allowing, you know, all of us to connect and have this meaningful conversation. So whether it's choosing to become part of a parent or dad community via Facebook, just as a way just to connect with like-minded people, I think that that's really something that can move the needle forward.
Okay, excellent. We're running down on time, but there were some questions that were put in the chat room that hopefully, well, there was one I hope one of you or all of you can address. I have a question from Nam saying, do any of the speakers have thoughts on cultural resiliency?
I'd love to speak on that.
Okay.
Again, coming from, I'm a first generation, so my parents were both born in Hong Kong. So I know that my upbringing was very different in the fact that I had parents that grew up in another part of the world. So they had their values, their cultural norms. And then coming and growing up as a Canadian, there was a different sort of value and cultural norms. So I know for myself that, and it's no judgment on, you know, my parents, they did the best they could, but sort of understanding that respecting the fact of the old values, but then also finding out how to bring some of those into the here and the now, right? And understanding that we all have things that we don't enjoy about our past, but just continuing to grow and learn from that, and just not making sure that we get, you know, we keep repeating the same mistakes, right? I'll give you an example here because I feel like I gave a very answer. In Asian culture, it's more about don't say anything, right? Bottle things up, suppress things. Where for me, I don't want that for my kids. So in our family, we have a very open way of talking about emotions and feelings, right? Just because I don't want my kids to ever feel like they have to suppress it, because when you suppress it, that eats away at people's resiliency.
Okay.
So.
Fantastic. Andrew or John, do you want to add on to that at all?
Just to say, I totally hear you, Justin. It's interesting. You know, we inhabit lots of cultures. You know, so we tend to think of it as a national identity or ancestry. But you know, fathering is a culture, and there's a whole culture around the contemporary nature of involved fathering as well. And so I think it's a really valuable thing to think about. And I'm no good processing live on this, but just to say it's a really valuable thing to think about how we norm certain practices based on our experiences, and that involves cultural pieces. And hopefully what it does is if it's truly inclusive, then it opens it up, and we've got some diversity of practice rather than narrowing us to be one particular way. You know, just sometimes acknowledging where practices come from is enough to help us think through them. So just to say.
No problem. Anything you want to add, Andrew, at all?
No, I mean, I think there's a lot to learn in that dialogue, and I think looking for some common area, you know, around goals for, you know, what do we want for your child or this child or that kind of thing can help us to find some bridging opportunities that you know, that if change is required, that where it might happen. Certainly something to think about.
All right. Just want to add on. Okay, so we're just going to do something here. There's so many comments. My gosh, I just gotta see where I go in here. All right, folks. So I'm just going to pick some comments in regards to what we've been chatting about here. Robin is saying, I also think it's important to remember it's all about repeated experiences. It's the consistency that matters in parenting, not the mistakes or opportunities that happen here and there. Darren saying, I agree, modeling not only the behavior we want to see, but modeling our own accountability when we make mistakes. Greg, teaching climate change resiliency, like growing own food, about clean energy and off-grid solutions, how to adapt to a changing climate. Robin gave a website address, infantmentalhealthpromotion.ca for reference. Ross, again, as a dad, I share your strengths, but share your strengths, but let your children know what you struggle with or need help with, and that everyone has areas they are good at and areas we need help with. Robin, again, we offer a baby love program at our early on center that includes both parents or any primary caregiver to build attachment and resiliency with our parents and babies. Babies love through Sick Kids Infant Mental Health Promotion. Bianca, I think, is giving some resources, CAPC and CPNP programs. Nadia, we will have our panelists get more at that question offline. Robin saying, building a connection with your cultural background, religious background, however, is a great way to build resilience as well. And I think we're gonna do it right there. Also, if you're on live on Zoom, Drew has provided a link where you can get some information for our next event. And also there's gonna be a survey at the end, or a survey you can take. But gentlemen, I wanna say thank you for taking time out of your positive, productive schedules, and just wanna have you take maybe a minute or two with any closing comments you'd like to share, and if people need more of you, where they can get in contact with you. So who'd like to go first?
Yeah, thanks again, everybody. And I look forward to sort of digesting this and reviewing it and learning from this experience as well. There's a website, fathersmentalhealth.com, which has a bit more information about fathers' mental health, a way to reach out to me. And for those that are in Ontario looking for, services for mental health support for dads, could explore that. Yeah, a story of a dad came into my office after, 2 young kids, and, he really felt like he was sort of losing hold of the steering wheel, I think both in life and of his car. And, he said, I've got kids in the back seat. I need to do something about this. And so it's been a real privilege and pleasure working with him. And to see things evolve. But he comes to mind a lot as we talk about building, maintaining resiliency for ourselves and for our kids.
Good. Justin, go ahead.
First off, I just wanted to thank everyone for their time and joining the conversation today. Ed and Drew, I'd just like to thank you for facilitating this discussion, and Andrew and John for being part of this amazing panel. If anyone wants to connect and needs the care of a community, then feel free to reach out on Facebook. I have a Win Each Day community on Facebook. It's just a chance just to connect with growth-minded people, and we look at a lot of different topics. So I would just say, don't feel like you're alone. Right? It's important to have these conversations. So whichever way allows you to continue to have these conversations, keep having them.
John.
Yeah, echo the thanks, and really nice to be able to have a conversation like this so early in the morning here in the West Coast. That's great. Set the tone for a really good day. Just to say, you can follow us and you can contact me at the Men's Health Research Program at UBC. We've got a nice little Twitter feed that puts out lots and lots of information, and we curate and we create a lot of content. Always happy to connect with folks, and if there's anything there that we might be able to help with along the way, do please reach out. My final thing that we haven't mentioned, and I'd just say at the front end I talked a tiny bit about, so sometimes kind of guys might come off as a bit aggressive or a bit irritable, and I think we've done some research in this, and so just to say that sometimes when that occurs, what we find with fellas is they don't forgive themselves. And then the shame makes it stoic, and then it silences the conversations that are so important to have. and a bit of a cascade of events. And so I just say that it's important to acknowledge, that we need to give permission for the mistakes we make as well, and to part of the resilience is to get on up and make a better job of it next time. But to acknowledge that we need to be a bit easy on ourselves, a bit forgiving on ourselves, because it's always it's a tough gig at the end of the day. So just to shout out in that respect.
You're on mute, Ed.
Sorry about that, Drew. It is your time to come in and close it all up for us. One other thing I will say, one message I always give to my fathers is that you never have bad days, you only have bad moments. And that it's not how much time you spend with your child or children, it's what you do with the time you spend with your child and your children. So I'll just hand it over to Drew.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Thank you, John. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Justin. And of course, thank you to everyone who joined in for your comments, for your engagement. It's been a fantastic conversation. There are a couple of key things that did jump out to me that I feel like I have to comment on, and I can't not mention it. And so Andrew's point early on, I'm going to summarize it as this idea of empathy. Just how critical it is as dads to be able to demonstrate and empathize with our kids so that we show that we actually understand them. I think that's one of the most critical things that we can do as far as helping them. And it also speaks to Justin's point around, them feeling, I forgot Justin's point, but anyways, the empathy piece is certainly quite important. The belief that dads need sometimes has to come from outside of them, because I think somebody mentioned they struggle with believing, and I think dads really need that support to say that, hey, you can be a great dad. You may have had problems in the past, you may be struggling, but you can actually achieve this. You can be a great dad. And I think they need that a lot more than people realize. And dads won't ever say it, I need help, generally. So if you work with dads, I would say, they need to feel that you believe in them, and you believe more so than maybe that you even realize. And so and John's point about unforgiveness, I'm a dad, I got 3 kids. I love my kids to death. I make mistakes all the time, and I truthfully beat myself up a lot. And I've realized, and I wrote an article about this on my own blog about, 5 key steps to overcome your mistakes as a dad. And because I think it's so critical, when we don't forgive ourselves, we actually, we go into a sort of downward spiral, and we isolate ourselves even more, and our kids can't connect and engage with us. And so to me, those are really great points that you've all made, and that were really crucial. I certainly experienced them myself, and I would encourage everyone to sort of take heart to a lot of those key points. But I do have a couple quick announcements I want to make as we close. One, there was a great comment from Neil Harris. The chat has been engaging and full, but with great insight and feedback from other people. And so his question was, can we share the chat comments? It would be saved. And so what I'd say is, I'm open to taking the chat and maybe depersonalizing it and putting some of the key insights and sharing it out. But I don't want to do that if you're not comfortable with it and you've been attending. So please just send me a message. It's drew@dadcentral.ca, or you can put it in the chat if you're not comfortable having this information sort of shared out with everyone in terms of just the chat. Of course, the recording is going to be going up, and we'll be sending it to people. A couple key things I want to mention. So our vision at Dad Central is really to see involved, responsible, and devoted dads for every child. And so the reason we exist is to connect, educate, and empower dads and organizations to support healthy child development. The way that we do that is today, and information, training, and resources that help organizations engage dads and serve families. And so one that I think is particularly helpful that we do have is a program that's called Super Dads, Super Kids. If you're an organization and you don't have something that serves dads, Super Dads, Super Kids is probably your best solution. It can be done virtually, it can be done obviously in person, which isn't happening now, but it's a great resource. And I'd say go to dadcentral.ca and check out our Super Dads, Super Kids program. Now, for those, I've already put it in the chat, a copy of a survey that we'd love to get your feedback on. We really want to keep bringing these types of conversations and training like this to dads and to those who serve families. But we also want to know what would offer the most value. And so by you completing the survey, you help shape what our future events will look like and serve your needs. To that point, our next online event is scheduled for June 2nd. It's right now going to be focused on paternity leave in Canada. So we'd really like to know what you want to know most about this in the survey, and then we can build that event based on your feedback. Also, we'd love to have you join us for that conversation. I put in a link where you can pre-register to save your spot. We don't have unlimited bandwidth and capacity, so we need to be able to know how many you can get. And so to guarantee your spot, please go onto that link and pre-register to save your spot. And so for me, just a final thank you. Ed, you wanted to say something, so I'll do my final.
Yeah, I wanted to say two things really quick. Love the promotion of Super Dad, Super Kids, especially online, because I'm one of the facilitators for it online. So if you have any questions about it, get in contact with Dad Central and they'll probably get in touch with me and we can talk about it. And second thing, huge thanks as always to Dove Men Care to help make these epic conversations happen. That's all I wanted to include.
That's great. Thank you, Ed. So for me, just a final thank you to everyone on our panel. John, Justin, Andrew, really appreciate your time and insights we shared today. And to everyone who did join us today. I know we're at the end, kind of dropped off, but and to everyone who's going to watch on the replay. At the end of the day, we hope that everyone has learned at least one thing that can help you develop either your own resilience and support your children in developing theirs. We definitely all need it now more than ever. And our kids, as we've talked about, need us to lead the way and model how it's done. So with that, please take care of yourselves. Everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And we look forward to seeing everyone again on June 2nd. All right, now, gentlemen, take care.